Okay, we've been through a lot. We now took our logical view, correct? There it is right there from my students, courses, and instructors. And we created the tables and we put the proper data types there. We converted them to the correct data type for this particular database management system, okay? We added not null because I just want you to understand what not null versus null means when it comes to building a table. So this is basically saying that every one of my columns needs to be populated if I insert or add some data to it. We basically said that this is telling the database management system that this is my primary key, and you'll get to know what that means a little bit more as as the weeks progress. But this is my primary key, and it must be unique. What else we do? And we ensure that every time we run this script, that we'll delete everything from the database first. We don't delete the database. We delete everything in the database, and then we redo everything else below it. So it's very important that drop tables is before the create tables. Once again, top down. Everything's top down. It will run top down. What do you think? Not too bad. You've come pretty good. If this makes sense to you, great. Here's the beautiful thing. This template that I have here for you, once again, nothing really changes. You're going to take it and modify. A lot of cutting and pasting versus typing. My recommendations, if you have 4 tables, take this right here and copy and paste it. Okay, just like this. I'm going to do, whoops, sorry, let's try this again. I would take this right here and copy it. And then I would come in here and I would paste it. Okay, and then what I would do is modify. So I would put in here that. Now make sure you don't erase anything by accident, just like I kind of did there. But so I would then modify it and put the new table in there, right? And so like products or whatever your databases have. And then I would modify each one of these. Some of these things have duplicate attributes to them, like first name, last name, and so on. Well, in some cases, you might be half done. All you got to do is copy and paste it down. You don't need to retype everything. Cut and paste and make this easy. But make sure you don't make a mistake and make sure you don't accidentally, miss this little bracket and so on as you go through. Does that make sense? Okay. Cool. Okay. The next step of this is, and you probably, I'm going to take this out here, and this is that, now that we have a database, okay, that's all good. Well, the database, what we want to do now is start playing around with this database. And to play around with this database, we're going to insert some data into the database. All right? Before we do that, and I show you how to do this, I want to take you over to a very important website that you should definitely get used to, and it's called W3 Schools. I very much like this website. I like it because it can teach you things, a lot of things, very easily. And it does it in a very effective way, I would say. Okay? So we use this website quite a bit in a lot of our courses. You'll hear me in different videos based upon what courses you're taking. I refer to this quite a bit in C and PHP and all kinds of different things, MySQL, and everything else that we're actually teaching here, okay? And so, but there's also a lot of things out here you can go learn on your own if you like. Once you kind of get used to it, you can see that the list is pretty exhaustive, from Bootstrap to Angular, React, jQuery, Ajax. Oh my God, it keeps going on and on. The one we're going to focus on, obviously, in this class is good old SQL, okay? So how I got there is I clicked on tutorials, and I went to learn SQL. And when I did this little SQL tutorial popped up. This is your friend. This is your buddy. This really will help you learn SQL as we go through it, okay? Why do I bring this up? Because you've already learned a little bit of SQL. So there's a lot of statements here. See, SQL, we'll get home in intro, but we get to the select distinct, where, all the way down from right joins, left joins. Guess what, everybody? We're going to cover most of these in this course, okay? Down to SQL database. Here we go. Create, drop. You see those right there? Create table, drop. I'm sorry, right here. Create table, drop table. You actually create the database and drop the database too in script. We didn't do it that way. We actually went over and did it, but we did these two. We will get into alter table probably a little bit next week as we play around with it. We talked about the primary keys so far. So we've actually, so if you sit back and click on create table, it will give you the code that you just wrote to create the table. From create table, blue meaning it's required, the table name, open brackets, the column names, and the data type. Yes, not null is not required. Okay, if it's you leave it out, you're going to allow nulls. Not null saying you can, and then close it. This does a really nice job of giving you examples, as you see right here. Okay, and how to go about doing it. Even I also love the idea that you can try it yourself. You actually can run the SQL. In this case, it's not going to do too much because we just created a table, but you actually can play around with this and change this and rerun it again. This comes in really handy later on when you're doing select statements. Okay, makes sense? Okay, I'm going to get back here. One thing it does do, it opens a better tab every time you try it yourself. So you might want to watch that. That gets kind of, you'll have all kinds of tabs open. All right. Okay. So as I said before, throughout this course, we're probably going to cover 90%, if not a little bit more, of probably about 90% of the majority of things that are in this list when it comes to SQL. So when you get done with this course, you're going to be quite competent in SQL, at least as a beginner database professional. All right. So with that said, one of the things I want to show you is the first thing we're going to talk about when it comes to SQL is insert. Okay, so for us to get a data into the database, we got to use an SQL command called insert. Insert's fairly easy, but you know it does require exactness. You can't misspell things, and you can't do different things like that. You will use inserts in your programming code when you get to programming 2 and then on. It's because what we're going to do is have you build a database application using Visual Basic and also using a lot of the stuff we're learning in this course within the code. Now, we're not doing that in this course. What we're going to do is we're going to do a lot of this SQL stuff that we're going to be teaching you, not in a programming language, but in that script, and we'll test it out. So these inserts are a little bit weird because you're going to physically insert the data to be able to play around with stuff. In the future, what really happens is those inserts belong into an application. Like when you came to Cincinnati State, you probably filled out an application, press submit. Behind the scenes, there was an insert that took that and inserted that into our database. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So with that said, what you need to do is you're going to learn inserts. And once you learn how to do an insert, you got it. And guess what? It's not very hard. So how's an insert work? You basically say insert into, again, if it's blue, it's required. You got to have that as part of your statement, to the actual table name, okay? And then you type in the columns. Unfortunately, if you want all the columns populated, which in our case we do because we have not null, you got to spell them all out, okay? Make sure, again, they are spelled exactly the way you created them. If you don't, you're going to get an error, all right? The next line says the values. What is the values of those columns? What are you going to put in there? And basically, it's a one-to-one relationship as you go through it, okay? You got it? So I'm going to back up a little bit. I said something maybe erroneously here. So you can actually insert into columns, but if you want to, you can also do an insert table name and have all the values. This would, if you're adding values for the columns of the table, you do not need to specify the column names in a SQL query. However, you can make sure the order. So in this case here, if you're going to insert the values exactly for everything that's in there, you don't actually need to be the column names. We would like you to put the column names down so you actually learn how to do this. All right. So there's this. They have a demo database here, which always kind of makes me laugh. I believe it's Dutch or Swedish or something. The names are. There's Finland and Poland. I don't know. There's a lot of weird names in here, and as you can see, look how this is actually taken care of. We sit back and say insert into customers. Here's the column names, and then the values are this right here, separated by a column. It's one-to-one, so the customer name's going to be Cardinal. The contact name's going to be Tom B. Erickson. The address is Skagen 21, and then Stavanger. Am I saying that right? Might be some people out there who know Stavanger from Norway. Unfortunately, I've never been there. And there you go. You get the idea. It has to be one for one. You can't have Norway over here, okay, and here when the country is last in the list. It has to be one to one in the exact same order. If you list your columns this way, how you insert your data must be the exact same way. Does that make sense? So if I sit back and say try it yourself and see how this one works, and we run this, it's just going to tell us that we actually made the changes and so on. That's cool. Make sense? Let's go back to our example. Once again, utilize W3 Schools to help you write these. I apologize for coughing. Okay, so let's get back to our database and kind of look at this. So what I want you guys to do is something very similar. Oh, a lot of students hate creating this data. Once again, utilize some of the stuff that we give you as examples. And so if you have maybe a customer database or a customer table in your database, you can go ahead and use our names and addresses and so on, cut and paste from this. We're perfectly fine with that. Okay, you just need to make sure you do it correctly. You need to make sure everything is taken care of and built correctly. All right, so how do we do this? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to enter 4 rows into this. That's what's kind of cool, that I can actually, instead of having 4 separate inserts, I can have one insert, and with my values can be separated by a comma, which would actually mean I have 4 rows. So remember, every database, I'm going to say this one more time, so every entity becomes a table. Every attribute becomes a row. Each instance in those entities, which means for a student, Betty could be a student, Bob could be a student, Tom could be a student, will be an insert into this table, and with all that data there. And that's called a row in a database. So tables, columns, and rows. Or if you want to actually do it in the right order, probably tables, rows, this is a row right here, and then the columns are the individual pieces that make up that row. As you can see, this is an instance. This is James Jones. This is where he lives, all right, all the way over. This is his date of birth, and he's Hispanic, and this is his social security number, okay? See how it matches up with social security number, race, date of birth, zip, and so on. Each line is like that. To put this data in, you sit back and so student ID is numeric. I highly recommend, though I think it works both ways, that you do not, so you see we have a bracket for the row, and then you put the data in. Anything that's numeric, I recommend you do not put quotes around. You don't have to. It may work if you do, but numeric data doesn't need quotes, okay? Comma, make sure you delimitate your data with a comma, and this is first name. So then I would put, since it's a varchar field or a text field, I would put a single quote around it. Okay? Comma, and you can see how this keeps going. Dates, you can put a single quote around that all the way through. So basically what I'm doing here is I inserted 4 rows of data. You might be saying, okay, why am I doing this? Well, we created a database physically. We might as well get some data in there. Because then what we're going to start doing as this course progresses and progresses and progresses is get information out of it. So what we're going to do is play a game here. We're not building an application, so we need to put the data into our database to play around. And this is how we're going to do it. On top of that, you're learning SQL, aka inserts. If this makes sense to you, give yourself a pat on the back. You just learned the insert command. And here's the beautiful thing. It's the same insert command that is in every programming language every time you press submit to add something to the database. It's the same insert command, okay? Obviously, the columns are different and the data is different, but it's the same insert command. This never changes. Yay, okay? You already know a little bit about SQL. All right, you go down here. I'm going to add some courses. Once again, everything needs to be there. Notice this here too. Remember, my student ID is my primary key. Every row needs to be unique. So 1 is the primary key for James Jones, 2 is the primary key for Sally Smith, 3 is the primary key for Jose, and 4 is the primary key for Kim. And I did this for all 3 tables. Okay? Like I said, feel free to cut and paste all you want. You don't need to make up new customers or new for like get them to buy it, new customers for that, or even for your what me like a lot and so on. Make things up, cut and paste, use the same ones over again, but you do need to make sure everything is lined up and there's quotes around it and they're all separated by commas. A lot of people doing this for the first time get a lot of error messages because they forget that or they don't see that or they try to go too fast. Do it well, do it right. Maybe get one insert to work correctly and then go back and do it again. Okay? What happens here when we actually run this, okay, we'll come back up here and run it from the beginning. I execute it, we'll get commands completed successfully. That actually means there's actual rows in our database. Now you might say to yourself, well, how do I know? All right, well, how you know is this. If I actually went down here and I did let's see, I'll just go to students here, okay. I did a right click on this and I say select the top 1,000 rows. It will pop over here and actually show me the rows I just inserted into my database. Sort of looks like an Excel spreadsheet. Here's every column and it goes through there. Now you might be saying, what did you just do? Well, once again, I went over and I said select it. It actually created a select command, which we're going to learn a little bit later on, okay, in a future video for this week that actually shows you how to get some of this information out. So it kind of did this for me, and there's all my data I just inserted into my table for students, okay? Does that make sense? Listen to this video again if you need to. Once you get this kind of working, it all kind of works out, okay? Now, that created a brand new script. I can exit out of that if I want to. What's happening here, though, one more time, I want to show you a thing. So how this actually works is I've inserted those rows, okay? If I came, because I have the drop tables, even those columns that are in there, those rows that we just inserted, it will delete the tables, these drop tables will delete the tables and delete the content within the tables. And then it starts all over again, recreating and inserting. So it's very important you create your tables, drop them first, then create your table into your script, and then insert into it. Does that make sense? If you do it that way, you shouldn't have any problem. Can things get a little frustrating? If you mistype stuff, it will. Or if you do something like this, say we put str names there. Right off the bat, it puts an underline saying, I don't know what that is. Okay? So it has to match exactly how you named it up here. So if you get that little error line, go up and make sure you see how you did it, okay, how you named it, and fix it. Okay? Does that make sense? And then once I fix that, we go from there. All right? So people do that sometimes. Sometimes people forget to close this and it all looks like this. And I have students walking up saying, Bob, why does it look like this? And I said, well, you forgot your closed quote on the thing. And I go, oh, God. You'll probably do that. It's okay. It's part of learning, okay? Now, in the online arena, sometimes it's hard to, you just can't walk up to the teacher and say, fix this for me or tell me what I'm doing wrong. You have to look at it a little bit, and hopefully these videos help you solve some of these problems. So we're trying to help you now when you have that, okay? So make sure you see it. If you have red underlines, it's trying to tell you something, and more than likely it is a syntax error, meaning you did something incorrectly. Go back to this template, look at it, and make sure you're doing it correctly. It has to be exact, or it's going to fail, okay? Anyway, congratulations, you just learned inserts.